everyone, today we're going to read Don't Be Silly, Mr. Twiddle. Chapter 8. Mr. Twiddle lets the cat in. Twiddle dear, let out the cat, will you? Said Mrs. Twiddle, busily knitting her chair by the fire. I don't know why you can't teach that cat to open doors, grumbled Mr. Twiddle, getting up. You always say she's so very, very clever, and yet she has never learnt a simple thing like that. Oh, she's very sharp, the way she goes and sits by the door whenever she wants to come in or out, said Mrs. Twiddle. Do hurry, Twiddle. I shall keep the cat waiting if I like, said Mr. Twiddle, who had never been able to like his wife's cat. He stopped to take something out of a drawer. The cat meowed. Don't call me names, said Twiddle. You're a most annoying creature. When you're out and you want to come in, and when you're in, you want to go out. I know you. You just want to go and have a chat with the cat next door so you can make me get up and let you out. And then when you find the cat next door isn't there, you want to get up and let you in. You're a nuisance. Meow, said the cat and began to wash herself. Mr. Twiddle opened the door, but the cat went on washing herself. Look at that now, said Twiddle, exasperated, asking to go out, and she doesn't want to go out after all. All right, I'll shut the door. Puss, and next time you want to go out, you can wait. He shut the door, but before it was quite closed, the cat slipped out like a shadow, and the tip of her tail was caught in the door. She gave us such an extinguished yowl that Mrs. Twiddle leapt out of her chair. Twiddle, how cruel are you? You shut the cat in the door. I did not, said Twiddle, a little scared himself by the cat's dreadful yowl. She slid out as I was shutting the door, and the tip of her tail got pinched, that's all. Serve her right. I will not have you talk like that, said Mrs. Twiddle, getting up all upset and dropping a stitch in her knitting. Well, we'll not talk any more about it then, said Twiddle, sitting down with his newspaper again. There's no more to be said. But there was, because Mrs. Twiddle had a great deal to say. Oh no. By the time she had finished, Mr. Twiddle was certain that he was the cruelest man in the world, and he had upset his wife enough to make her feel quite ill, and he half killed the poor dear cat. And now I suppose you won't get her in tonight, said Mrs. Twiddle, a tear dropping onto her knitting. You make her stay out in the cold. I will get her in, said kind-hearted Mr. Twiddle, who really couldn't bear to see his wife upset. Happy wife, happy life. I'm sorry I pinched her tail. I promise I'll get her in tonight. Thank you, Twiddle, said Mrs. Twiddle in a small voice, and she smiled at him. After that, he read his newspaper in peace, and he forgot all about the cat till Mrs. Twiddle said it really was time for bed. She put away her knitting and got up. You'll get the cat in there, won't you? She said. Oh, dear me, the cat, yes. Oh, I'll get her in, said Twiddle. You can go on up. Open the scullery door, dear, and she'll come in there and go straight to the basket by the copper, said Mrs. Twiddle. There are mice there, and I like her to sleep there right now instead of the kitchen. Right, said Twiddle, and opened the door for Mrs. Twiddle to go upstairs. Then he yawned, made up the fire to keep in from the night, and he wound up the clock. Then he went out of the kitchen into the scullery and opened the door. No cat came in sliding in by his legs. He called loudly, Puss, puss, puss! Come along, puss, puss! No puss came. Mr. Twiddle waited for about 3 minutes till he felt rather cold. Then he called again, rather impatiently, Puss, puss! Didn't you hear me? Come along at once! No cat appeared, surprisingly. Mr. Twiddle began to wish that he hadn't promised to let her in that night. Suppose the cat had just kept him standing there for an hour. It would just be like her. She's probably hiding in a bush right outside, laughing to herself. As if cats can laugh, definitely. My 2 cats always laugh every single time. Oh, no, wait, 3 cats. Yes, they always laugh every time. Definitely. It's a certified scientific fact. Definitely. I promise you, it's like, yeah. Twiddle felt angry. Then the idea came to him. He would rather tempt the cat in. He went to the larder and found fish for breakfast. 3 nice earrings. He took one, wrapped it up in a newspaper, and then laid it on the mat just inside the scullery door. Then he went back to the warm kitchen and sat down with his paper again to wait for the cat to come in. He was sure she would hear the rustling of paper as the cat tried to get at the herring. That means to hop up, shut the door, and put the fish back into the larder. Such a nice, simple plan, thought Mr. Twiddle. And indeed it was. Unfortunately, Mr. Twiddle fell sound asleep as he got back into his chair. He didn't hear the cat come in and fiddle with the paper around the fish. He didn't hear the next door cat come in too and get excited about the herring. He didn't even hear the ginger cat across the road walk in, or the big tabby cat from the bottom of the garden. Oh, by the way, that's how I got my 3 cats. Mrs. Twiddle's cat was angry to think that she might have to share the herring with the others. She spat and hissed at them. Then it walked in Black Tom, the biggest cat in the town, and all the others made way for him. Black Tom began to tear the paper. The other cats came closer. He hit out at them. The tabby hit back, spitting and snarling. Then quite suddenly, all the cats exploded together in one big hiss of anger. The noise awoke Mr. Twiddle. He sat up and remembered his plan of getting the cat indoors. She's there now. He thought to himself, how clever am I? I'll just pop the fish back into the larder and shut the scullery door. Hi, Puss, is that you? All the 5 cats heard his voice and became quiet. They hid in different places. As he came out into the dark scullery, on the floor, he groped about for the fish and found it with its paper almost off. He popped it into the larder and spoke to the cats. Now settle down and go to sleep, Puss. No more getting in and out tonight. He went into the kitchen. Unfortunately, he had left the larder open. And soon the cats found this out. Now they have 5 cats. As soon as Twiddle was safely upstairs in bed, Black Tom led the way to the fish smell in the larder. The parcel of herrings was dragged down with a thud. A small dish came with it and broke on the floor. The cats spat at one another. Mrs. Twiddle awoke with a jump when the dish broke. She sat up in bed and listened. She couldn't make out what the noise downstairs was. She clutched poor Twiddle and woke him up with a start. Twiddle, it's burglars! Me every single day. They're downstairs. Twiddle had often been awakened by Mrs. Twiddle and told they were burglars, but they had never been there, and he was tired of going downstairs for nothing. He turned over and settled himself confidently again. Rubbish, he said sleepily. You're imagining things as usual. Psst, went the cats, and one of them gave a frightful howl. Oh no, wait, that's a dog. Okay. Cats became dogs. Mr. Twiddle sat up with a jump, and Mrs. Twiddle groaned in a fright. Twiddle, you simply must go down and see what it is, whispered Mrs. Twiddle. Twiddle didn't want to go in the least, but he had to pretend he was brave, even if he didn't feel like it, so down he went, with a poker in one hand and a hammer in the other. The nose came down from the scullery. Mr. Twiddle switched on the light suddenly and stood still in horror of the scene. The place was full of cats, so even more came. Now they have 20 cats. Lovely! They chewed and hissed and gnawed and spat. Mr. Twiddle went suddenly mad with rage. He leapt at them, dealing out slaps and blows with his bare hands. For even his rage, he felt he couldn't use the poker or the hammer. The cats began to yowl and snarl, almost falling over one another, trying to get away from the angry man. That's for you! Take that! How dare you come into my house, cats! Out of my way! Out of my way! I'll cheat you, till I'm here in the middle of the night! Mrs. Twiddle, trembling upstairs, felt certain that Twiddle must be dealing with at least 5 dangerous burglars. How brave of him! How marvelous he was! Then she suddenly heard the scullery door open again and then shut again with a bang. After that, Mr. Twiddle came upstairs, panting and angry. Mrs. Twiddle greeted him with open arms. "Twiddle, dear, how brave you are! Are you hurt? How many were there?" "5 at least," said Twiddle. "Probably 7 or 8. Oh, so 8, not 20. Okay, never mind. "Anyway, I've dealt with all of them and sent them flying." "I think you're marvelous," said Mrs. Twiddle, still thinking that Mr. Twiddle had fought burglars. Mr. Twiddle was pleased and surprised at his wife's admiration. "I went for them like anything," he said. "You should have seen them rush out of the scullery door, tails out behind them." Mrs. Twiddle felt astonished. "Tails?" she said. "Did you say tails? How could they have tails?" "Don't cats generally have tails?" said Mr. Twiddle. "Cats? What are cats? I thought they were burglars," cried Mrs. Twiddle. "Of course they were cats," said Mr. Twiddle crossly. "I suppose that stupid animal of yours brought them all in. They've eaten partially everything in the larder. Oh, how wicked! How dreadful! Oh, Twiddle, I do hope you gave our puss a smacking too and sent her out. I hope you don't let her in again." "I did not," said Mr. Twiddle. "I had great pleasure smacking her in. Now perhaps you won't make me keep getting out to let her in and out?" "I certainly won't," said Mrs. Twiddle, very angry indeed to think that her petted spoiled cat should actually have dared to fill the scullery with her friends and raid the larder. "Well, well, well, Puss could certainly stay out all night." Twiddle fell asleep and snored a little. Mrs. Twiddle lay and thought about the cats. Then she suddenly stood up and poked Twiddle. "Twiddle, there's something I want to know. Who left the larder open so the cats got in?" But Twiddle was not going to answer questions like that. Not he. He snored a little louder and made no movement at all. Leave till morning. Perhaps Mrs. Twiddle will forget about it till then. But she definitely won't. It's quite certain that she will remember to ask Twiddle that question. And a lot more besides. Poor Twiddle. He does get himself into trouble, doesn't he? Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, it was me, Mira. Goodbye.
Of your telly, put away your